Everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted to be having a second chat. It's technically a third chat because we have since met in person. Glad to be talking with comics creator John Bivens. John, thank you for jumping in and joining.
Thank you for having me back.
A pleasure, a pleasure. Now, the last time we recorded, I think we were in your studio, which you share with Xander Cannon. Is that right?
Yeah, that's in the same city I am right now. It's in Northeast Minneapolis. It's called World Monster HQ.
Oh, nice,
There's
nice.
like a good full handful of us that share the studio there. Xander, Peter Wortman, who does like Avatar: The Last Airbender,
Hmm, hmm.
uh, Ted Anderson, who's written a bunch of comics, including like My Little Pony, and Kevin Cannon, not related to Xander, who did like Far Arden and all that kind of stuff with like Top Shelf. So yeah,
Nice, nice. So we are in another creative space, it looks like here.
this is
Uh,
my home space. This is I'm not clean in either space, but this is a really messy space. So yeah.
the creativity, it needs room. We have the lovely table behind you as well as some Pringles that I'm spotting there to
Oh yeah.
fuel the creativity. Any particular media that you're currently working with?
I've been using a lot more gouache, and let's see, I have been breaking out the airbrush a bit more here and there, especially for commissions. So it's somewhere around me. Oh, here we go. Yeah, just like the little hand airbrush. So,
Nice, nice. Very
also,
cool. Love it. Well, we have, as I said, since met in person, and I was able to pick up this book from you, which you were also kind enough to sign on the inside, and been enjoying that. You said this is kind of like you on the page.
yeah, if we're to actually look through any of the books I've done, that one is the most my personality.
Hmm, hmm.
I would say that as far as like what I grew up with and all that kind of stuff, being like born at the end of the 70s, growing up in the 80s, I was one of those kids who was allowed to, or people really didn't care if I, got to like the VHS movies that I shouldn't have been watching too early and watched all those. And it was all the super schlocky stuff where then I would hide behind my hands and my fingers in order to like not watch the scary scenes. But now, having grown up, I get more of a chuckle from the scary scenes of those movies and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Very interesting stuff. And there's definitely the dark humor that weaves into the book, which I also appreciated, and some very interesting twists and turns.
Oh, yeah. I kind of sell it as like you take Return of the Living Dead, Night of the Creeps, and a little bit of Terror Vision. If you know those movies and you like those movies, you're gonna like this book. So,
Nice, nice. Now we had the chance to meet at Heroes Con, or I imagine this is a busy time with conventions, getting around, going to different spaces. Any other spots on the journey ahead?
June was insanely busy. July is actually my quiet month that I kind of take to myself. I still do like one show here in Minneapolis. Well, not even really a show. It's a store that a buddy of mine opened called Odd Mart. It was
Mhm.
opened by Brad McGinty, who does Blurp Gum and did Madball comics and all that kind of stuff. And it's his brick and mortar, but he has like a sort of like a combination with all the other comic shops in South Minneapolis, a comics crawl to each place, and I'll be at his store selling that. But that's really the only event that I'm doing. Then in August, I'm doing a WickedCon
Oh,
up
nice,
in
nice.
Boston. So yeah,
Cool,
so that'll
cool.
be the next like traveling convention I have to do.
Yeah, yeah. Now, of course, folks out there, I probably mentioned this on the first episode that we did as well, but they'll know you for work like Spread and Dark Engine, Retroverse, Old Wounds, lots of creating that's out there. And we were talking just a minute ago about some of the inspirations that you had as a young person. Any particular stories, types of stories that you revisit, anything that gets you in the creative zone?
Uh, Honestly, what I tend to look at most is kind of what I described with like cult classic. There is that I tend to actually find I mean, I grew up with comics, but nowadays I tend to end up looking at a lot of other media for the inspiration and stuff like that. So I go back to a lot of movies, and it helps that essentially when I'm actually working and drawing stuff, I I have to put on things where I don't have to look at the screen and pay attention to them. So
Hmm.
it has to be
Hmm.
things that I've seen like a few times here and there, right?
Yeah.
So while I'm working, I can draw and I can hear what's going on and I know what's happening on the screen. So things like Big Trouble Little China go on. Actually, most John Carpenter films will go up for me, or like Reanimator and all that kind of stuff is kind of what I tend to go to. And then I've gotten to the point where uh, I'm kind of trying to learn how the cinematography more and like the editing is working in the films, and trying to take some of those ideas and move it. So I'm also going through YouTube channels like Every Frames of Painting and all that kind of stuff, where they break down why things are edited how they are and what kind of transitions are happening, and seeing if I can take some of that and bring it into comics. So
Love it, love it. And there are similarities between those two. There are differences. So I imagine it's kind of a creative process to decide how something works in film editing versus how it's going to unfold on the comics page.
yeah, can I take this? Can I make it work? Can I kind of like bring something new into what I'm doing, instead of just rehashing the same thing over and over again? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Cantilevered angles, yes. Flickering lights, maybe not.
If you have enough small panels.
True, true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Very cool. Well, a lot of people, when they think about comics, they first think about like Spider-Man or superheroes of other kinds. But your work kind of tackles these more horror oriented spaces, which I really appreciate because one of the themes of the show is you can pretty well do anything with comics.
Mhm.
So, curious about what that's been like to kind of expand what current comics do.
Luckily, I think that I'm in a pretty good time for someone who's actually interested in that right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
The audience is they're not necessarily tired of superhero books, but they've expanded and they want more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's constantly like this uh, roll call change of smaller publishers that have realized that they're not necessarily going to be competing with like the big two in the superhero world. And so they're looking to kind of find a place for work outside of that, and to establish themselves. And so there is a market for what I want to do at this point that isn't just self-publishing, though more and more I get into it, the more and more I just want to self-publish and that kind of stuff. So
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. How is that direction heading? Any particular projects that you're currently exploring with self-publishing?
well, I'm always having fun kind of. There's a stuff that I kind of enjoy doing on my own, which have been more short stories. And then I do still love collaborating and that kind of stuff. So like right now on my screen, I'm taking a old pitch that Justin Jordan and I, who worked together on Spread, something we
Hmm.
put together, and I'm kind of going back and reworking it, cleaning it up. Gonna at least make that into a mini comic, so I have something that is small but new on my table. And we did something like this with a mini comic we call Burning West, which includes the script pages and that kind of stuff to show a process.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's a process mini as well as having like a new little story in it. But then currently, we're still kind of picking out what it's going to be. But Phil Hester and I have been talking about working on a project together, and so and he's trying to kind of shape that to fit what I do. So
Nice.
so Phil wants to work on writing a story for me, and he just wants to make sure that it's going to fit kind of my personality. So
Love it. Love
so
it.
working on that together, and I'm kind of at the point where I figure no matter what, I'm going to get it out in the world somehow, whether it's going to be a publisher, or whether we have to put it out ourselves, whether we have to kickstart it or anything like that. So I don't worry about that. It's just a matter of, finishing the stuff now, which is the big thing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. But I imagine there's a really nice amount of creative freedom, both to having those options and to getting to do the creator owned spaces.
Oh yeah, yeah. Definitely love it. God, aside from that, I'm even working with a couple like local filmmakers I've known for forever. Taking they're low budget filmmakers, and they have a story which just won't work for low budget, but they were like, I'm going to take this and I'm going to go through the script. I'm going to mark it up. I'm going to change, like this is going to go to extremes, and then I'm going to give it back to you so that we can have the same voice for the characters and stuff like that, and then give it back to me, and we'll look at actually making something out of this.
Nice. Nice. Very cool collaborative process.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the best things, if you're local or semi-local, actually being able to meet up with people and like discuss the story.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know this if this is like fact or fiction or anything like that, but the idea of like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in a car with another person in the back and listening to them go back and forth and figure out what the story's going to be.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I think that can be done easier in person than and a little bit more free form. So
Yeah. A jam session, if you
yeah,
will.
exactly. Improv. It's improv. It's all yes and. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love Phil Hester's working in crime comics, and those kind of stories. So very curious, and I'll be interested to see what comes out in the mix between the two of you.
Yeah, it's something that we've been talking about for actually a few years now, and it's finally like we did a Comic Con, Des Moines Con together recently, and we're like, okay, we're gonna do this now, and then we just sat down and we started working things out, and so
Yeah. Anything currently on the drafting table that you'd like to mention, or recent work that any particular titles that I didn't kind of spiel?
well, you mentioned Retroverse, and we're still waiting. Like Cullen Bunn and I are figuring out exactly where that's going to end up in print. It's still
Hmm.
available online and that kind of stuff. Let's see. Aside from that, I just finished up a thing with like Eric Palicki that he story he commissioned me to go ahead and work on with him. And that's fun, and that's going to be, I believe, a crowd-funded piece that should be getting announced soon enough, or getting
Nice.
like he's already kind of talked about it at conventions and that kind of stuff. So once he's got all the I's and T's dotted and crossed, then that will go live. So yeah,
Nice.
so that'll be coming. And like I said, just working on this mini comic thing with Justin and a bunch of things that I've had on the back burner for way too long. So
Yeah. Yeah. I love the mini comic short story format. I guess it goes back to kind of like the EC books of getting, one book with three or four different stories.
mhm.
So it's cool how you've brought that back and been part of bringing that back because, of course, we had EC,
Yeah.
and then a long period of superhero comics with some creating, but nice to be in this time of all sorts of different types of stories being told.
Oh yeah. And showing how it's like a good time for all this kind of work coming back. Now we got EC is coming back with Oni, and then we have uh let's see, Creep Show coming back with or is back with Skybound and all
Hmm.
that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. So those kind of small format stories and that kind of stuff, it's cyclical to come back, and as long as there isn't like some other giant government oversight committee trying to knock down comics again, hopefully
Yes.
they can survive.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so. Well, I think I just have a few more questions to wrap us up with our brief talk. One of those being, where would you like to head next in creating any particular vision for the way that you want to challenge yourself or particular types of stories that you'd like to tell?
Uh, I would like to basically, like I said, I like to get into a lot more like pure creator owned and that kind of stuff, essentially where uh like me if I have a collaborator or if I don't, just has more stories or more say over getting into like the licensing and the way that everything is going to be published and all that kind of stuff. Essentially, like moving past just the creating the artwork, putting that down and handing it in, but handling a little bit more of the minutia and that kind of stuff, and keeping a little bit more control over the steps where it goes. Um, just because I feel like that's something I really haven't gotten into more as much at this point. So
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Love that and looking forward to what's on the way. And I love that I also get to kind of discover something from you. I'd seen Cult Classic sort of out online, but glad to connect with you in person and pick it up. And any particular spaces where people can connect with the work where you like to share?
Um, right now I've just started some gallery pages if people want to see original work on like comic art fans. Currently I'm in the middle of building a new site and shop. Uh my old one is just it's horrible. I just need to get it replaced. Aside from that, coming up, you can find me at WickedCon. Let's see, other conventions I have coming up. I know I'm going to definitely be doing SuperCon, which is in Sioux Falls. So that's a Midwest one. I have to confirm a couple with my comic original art agent to see if I'm definitely doing them or not, but those are the two definite. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, but very cool and glad to have you back anytime as you're creating